Okay, welcome back, everybody. We are going to now talk about Part B services under IDEA. Again, that stands for the Individuals, with Disabilities and Education Act. And Part B covers the continuum of services from pre-kindergarten, age of 3, through the age of 21. And so we're going to go over the referral process and the IEP process in this presentation. So we are going to talk about Part B referral and evaluations, timelines, parents' rights, the continuum of services from preschool through age 21. That's on our agenda for this presentation. Grab some popcorn, get comfortable, take some good notes. All right, so Part B, the referral and evaluation process refers to children 3 years of age to 21 years of age. I know it's like a little bit confusing because when we talked about Part C services, we talked about children birth through age 3, and I know my mind goes to alphabetical order, and you would think Part B is the younger children and Part C. No, I'm sorry. Part B refers to the older children, age 3 to 21. We'll talk about the process of referral, how children are located, identified, and evaluated, who, how, what, and when that happens. This presentation is linked in modules, and the link that you see on this screen you can access through the PowerPoint presentation. This just takes you to OSPI's, I think I left it open, let me take a look here, OSPI's page on making a referral. And so here it is. If you were wondering how our state, this is a federal law, but how our state responds to the federal law, here's the information about making a special education referral for Part B children age 3 to 21. So you could see who can make a referral for special education, parents, school personnel, school district staff, or any person with knowledge about a student can make the referral requesting that the student be evaluated. So think about that again. Parents, school personnel, school district staff, or another person with knowledge about the student. But all of this has to happen with parental consent, of course. Does the request need to be in writing? Yes. Yes, the request needs to be in writing. In some school districts, there's actually a form that you fill out to give a little bit of background information about a child and their family setting that supports the evaluation process. Sometimes it could just be an email to the school psychologist or to a teacher that can help get access to the referral process, but it has to be in writing. And then what information should be used in a written request? So services that you're requesting to be evaluated for should include why you think the student may need special services, the area of suspected disability, which we will talk about more about in this presentation, what you think the challenges are, and which areas are you asking to be evaluated. Who do you submit the referral to? You can send that referral to any school member who is involved in special education. So it could be the principal, the school psychologist, special education teacher, or even just the general education teacher, because they can get that information to the person that it needs to get to. So what happens after a referral is submitted? This is on the presentation that I'm about to flip back to as well. But your written referral puts into motion a series of timelines that the school district has to respond to with your request. So the referral happens, the school has 25 days to decide whether or not to evaluate a student. So they might say, you know what, within that 25 days, we've seen your kid, we've had eyes on your child. We think with just a little more experience in school or in a preschool setting even, that they will catch up to their peers. No evaluation is needed at this time. Or they might say, yep, let's do a child find appointment. Let's get this child screened. Then a written parental consent for evaluation is requested, and then the school has 35 days from that date to complete an evaluation. Is the school district required to have a referral meeting? A meeting to discuss the referral is not required. However, a meeting is scheduled by the district to take place when you must be invited to attend the meeting to discuss the referral. So if they want you there to discuss the referral, there has to be a meeting. By you, I mean parents. But you also might be a preschool provider or someone involved with the child. So how will the district make a decision about evaluating my student? So the referral process includes a review of existing data about your child. It could be information that you've provided, medical information, information about a student's performance at school, like preschool, private childcare, at home, other settings. And then based on all of the information, the school has 25 days to make a decision if they're going to evaluate or not. And what happens if the school district decides not to evaluate my student? If they decide not to, it doesn't mean that support just stops. They do have to provide you with a written notice with their decision not to evaluate, and they have to state why they believe the student doesn't need to be evaluated. You have the option, or the parent or the referring party has the option to challenge the district's decision in one of their dispute resolution options. And we're going to talk more about that process as well. Let's get back to our presentation. That was kind of all of it in a nutshell when we think about who, how, what, and when. But that's a great resource if you want to go back to that link. It's on OSPI's website. So who? We talked about this. Who can refer? Parents, school personnel, anybody knowledgeable about the students. The request to be referred for evaluation happens in writing. And it needs to go to the appropriate person. It could be the school psych, principal, special education director, or SPED teacher. It could also be the general education teacher who then passes that information on to the appropriate person. Oftentimes parents are a lot more comfortable with the general educator because it's someone that they know and someone that knows their child. And so if you are more comfortable, if you are a childcare provider or working in private preschool and you know the kindergarten teacher, it's okay to reach out to a kindergarten teacher and say, hey, who do I give this to? Or can you get this to the right person for me? And then what and how. So in writing, remember, an email is considered a written document, so that is fine if you are just writing an email requesting referral. In that email, make sure that you state why you are making a request, which situations are challenging, do you have any documentation? If you're working in Head Start or ECAP, you likely have your social emotional screenings and your developmental screenings that you've already conducted, plus whatever ongoing assessments that you have been collecting. Same in private childcare. If you're working in an early achievers program, you likely have similar documentation that could be shared with the school district. You should also state which areas need to be evaluated. So think of it in terms of child development. So at Pierce College, we talk about physical, intellectual, emotional, and social development. You would want to indicate which areas you believe the child needs evaluated. We just went over this timeline. So when does the referral happen, or the acknowledgement or notification of a decision? What does this look like? So here's the timeline. There has to be parental consent. The referral is sent in. The school district has 25 days to decide whether or not to evaluate, and then parental consent for evaluation happens, and 35 days the school has to complete the evaluation. So here is a special education flow chart of that process. I'll take you to the link. Oops, maybe I'm not going to take you to the link, but here it is again. This is the same that was on the previous page. The referral, they have 25 days to respond to the referral, 35 days to complete the evaluation, and then 30 days to put the IEP, or individualized education plan, into action. So it's a pretty, in the grand scheme of things, this timeline can feel like it's taking forever in terms of school days, right? So a public school has 180 contact days. If we do that math from point of referral to point of services being offered, we're looking at 65, 85, 90 days. That's half a school year. So the sooner that this process happens, the sooner the child is going to receive services. And I will say, in my experience working with school districts, I've worked with 6 different school districts in my time in the field, and each one operates differently within this timeline. Some school districts are super fast, and their turnaround is within days. And then I've had some school districts that I've worked with where they are scraping by to the last second to get this process done for many different reasons. Sometimes it's a lack of staffing, sometimes it's data collection, they're trying to get to know a child, But just depending on your school district and educators and parents, you have a lot of sway in how quickly this happens or doesn't happen. So if you feel like, okay, we're reaching the end of that 25 days and I haven't heard, don't be afraid to call. Don't be afraid to ask. And then if you've been contacted and a referral is going to happen, an evaluation is going to happen, and you're sitting at 20 days, don't be afraid to reach out and say, hey, there's 2 weeks left in this evaluation period. Where are we at? And then when it comes to developing the IEP, let's just say the more contact, the better. It will happen sooner if a parent or a preschool teacher or childcare provider is kind of helping push the envelope a little bit. All parents receive this notice of special education procedural safeguards for students and their families at every meeting. I have to say, as a parent who has 3 children on IEPs and has been through this process many times with families and supporting families through this process, you get one of these at every time you meet, regardless, you get a new copy of this little booklet each time, and school districts make it accessible through OSPI's website as well. And this is so that all parties understand their legal rights and limitations under IDEA and the services that are provided to children and families. And so if you are an educator and read this, make sure that you understand this document and what it says and the rights of the family and the child, and make sure that you can help parents understand it as well. This is a lengthy document. It can be very tedious and overwhelming, but it's an important one to understand the student's rights. Let's talk a little bit about least restrictive environment before we run out of time here. But least restrictive environment, you will see shortened to LRE in literature and in our coursework. That just stands for least restrictive environment, and that is an education setting that is closest to the general education classroom that still allows the student to access an appropriate education from which they benefit. So sometimes this does mean the general education classroom. Sometimes that is the least restrictive environment for a student. This is always defined in their IEP. It's called out directly where the student's LRE is. It may be a resource room. It may be a separate setting that the child goes to for part of the day or part of the school week. Things that are considered when deciding LRE is the content of the IEP and where those services are best met or provided, what the LRE requirements are, the likelihood that the placement will provide reasonably high probability of the student obtaining their annual goals. So how successful will that student be in this LRE? Are they going to be able to obtain the goals set forth in the IEP? And then any possible harmful effects placement may have on the student or on the quality of services. And so for some students, isolation is going to be incredibly harmful. And for some students, they may need a more private space to do their work or to receive their services. And this all is based on relationship and what a staff member knows about the student. And then continuum of services. We are going to run out of time here. Let me just take a look. Might make it, actually. Okay. My clicker is going as if I've got only 15 minutes on these presentations. So the continuum of placement options includes the general education classroom, the gen ed classroom with support services and or modifications to the environment, a combination of gen ed classes and special education classes. So you'll hear the term pull-out services where maybe a service provider, an OT, a PT, or an SLP takes the child out of the general education classroom for a portion of the day, or even for 20 or 30 minutes at a time. Maybe they go to the resource support room. Then there are self-contained special education classrooms. This is usually for the most impacted special education students who need more one-on-one individualized support. And then there's also placements outside of the school district, which we don't actually hear often about. And sometimes it's in a different school district. For example, in my community, I live on the Kitsap Peninsula. There's only one class, or there's only one school district in our area that provides services for deaf and hard of hearing students, and that's in the Central Kitsap School District. And so children are often bused from Bremerton, South Kitsap, North Kitsap, Bainbridge Island. They're bused to Central Kitsap for that deaf and hard of hearing program. And then there's also specialized schools, Northwest Soil. We actually have some of our students doing their student teaching at Northwest Soil this year. and programs like Child. There's also home instruction and family home visiting, and then residential care or treatment facilities. For example, at Western State Hospital, the Child Study and Treatment Center. We're running out of time, so take a look at this slide. What does this all mean for you? And we're going to stop there. All right, everybody, have a great